"I'm sorry, Mom. I'll be good." Amid the Fairbend blizzard, it was a whisper that should have been lost to the wind. But Max heard it with a protector's instinct. Inside his cabin, veteran Eli Turner craved only silence to escape his past. But his retired K-9 partner would deny him that peace. The dog dragged him out into the night, toward a secret on the verge of being lost to the storm. When Eli found the little girl, he wasn't just rescuing a life from the cold. He was confronting a ghost from his own past, a grief he had spent 20 years trying to bury. That night, in the heart of the unforgiving blizzard, a family with no blood ties began to form, forged not by words, but by the silent vow of absolute protection. Eli opened the door, and the storm's chill slapped him in the face. Outside, snow drove sideways on howling winds. Max's decade-old frame had slowed, but a K-9's senses never did. In an instant, the old dog with the stiff right leg was gone. He sprang to his feet, silent, and bolted into the storm as if obeying a command only he could hear. "Max!" Ellie roared. Thoughtlessly, Eli snatched his boots, shoved on his gloves, threw on his coat, and plunged after the dark shape into the whiteout. The flashlight in his hand barely pierced the gloom, but he followed the deep paw prints in the snow, cutting across the hill and down toward the edge of the woods. 10 minutes later, Eli was soaked to the knees. He found Max just past the edge of Miller Park. The dog stood at the base of a slide, stock still, ears flat, nose to the ground. Then Eli saw her. A pale face, blue-tinged lips, hair matted to her cheek. Hey, little one, can you hear me?" Eli's voice was rough, nearly lost to the wind. The girl stirred, her lips parted. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I'll be good." That was all. She slumped back into the snow, her breath a faint mist. Eli didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, wrapping her in his own coat. He looked down at Max. "Go home, boy." "Get the door," he commanded. As if understanding every word, Max bolted. The storm still raged outside, the wind whipping at the windows. But inside, the cabin was warm. A little girl lay safe. A soldier breathed a sigh of relief, and Max, the dog who refused to forget his duty, stood watch over them both. Lily remained still. For an hour, Eli just sat there, watching the small rise and fall of her chest. Each breath was a miracle, a fragile victory against the night. Nearby, Max was a coiled, silent sentinel, his eyes never leaving the girl. As Eli gently wiped her forehead with a warm cloth, his hand froze. For the first time, he truly saw her face. The thin frame, the high cheekbones, and the large eyes even closed that held a familiar sorrow. His mind snapped back to Grace, his sister, who had been all fire, defiance, and laughter before she fell silent. Cast out by their parents, called a disgrace for getting pregnant at 19. She had left town with nothing but a promise that she'd be okay. It was the last time he ever saw her. Now here he was, with a little girl who looked so much like Grace had. And then he saw it, a small, battered notebook on the floor, surely fallen from her coat. He slowly picked it up, the pages damp and warped. The front cover held just 3 scrawled words, Lily's log. He gently peeled the damp pages apart. Inside, there were no words, only pencil sketches that told a story that was both silent and brutal. A little girl at a table, alone before a plate of cold food. A large hand, raised in anger. A woman with furious eyes, pointing at a spill on the floor. Page after page, each drawing was a fragment of a broken life. Eli drew a sharp breath, a whisper escaping through his teeth. "Oh God." He closed the notebook, his own breath heavy. He didn't need an explanation. As a soldier, he'd seen the hells men create. But this hell, drawn by the hand of a child, was a different kind of agony altogether. Lily woke a few hours later. She saw Max first, then Eli. "You're not a cop," she mumbled, her voice hoarse. "No, Eli said gently. I'm Eli. This is Max. He's the one who found you. She didn't answer. She just clutched the blanket around her shoulders and pulled it tighter. You're safe here, Eli added. No one is coming for you. You're not in trouble. Lily sat up slowly. Her movements were stiff, as if her limbs weren't quite obeying her yet. Her hand trembled as she reached for the notebook. Eli handed it to her without a word. She hugged it to her chest. Did you read it? I did, he answered. I thought you were dying. I needed to understand. Lily said nothing more, but she didn't run. A sharp knock on the door broke the silence in the cabin. Eli stiffened, his gaze immediately snapping to Lily, but she seemed not to hear, lost in a world of her own. It was Sarah, his only neighbor for a mile, holding a bag of supplies. Some blizzard, she said, but her eyes slid past Eli, landing on the small form by the fire. A moment of silence. Sarah didn't ask. She just set the bag on the table and met Eli's eyes, a knowing smile on her lips. Looks like the storm brought you more than just snow, she said softly. Whatever's going on, Eli, this is the best place for her. After Sarah left, Eli brought Lily a steaming bowl of chicken soup. She ate slowly. When the bowl was empty, she looked up, her voice barely a whisper. Can I stay the night? You can stay as long as you need, Eli answered, his voice firmer than it had ever been. She looked down. They might find me. Do you want them to? She didn't answer. In the days that followed, the snow began to melt. Lily remained quiet, spending most of her time drawing in her notebook. Eli watched her from a distance, giving her space, but he couldn't help but notice. Then one morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Lily tucked a loose strand of light brown hair behind her ear. A jolt shot down Eli's spine. It was Grace's gesture, an unconscious habit he'd seen 1,000 times, a memory he thought time had buried. The familiarity lingered in his mind, an unexplainable pull, as if drawn by an invisible force. He found himself walking toward the storage shed, to the old, dust-covered wooden trunk where he kept what little he had left of his sister. The lid groaned in protest as he opened it. The smell of mothballs and old wood hit him. At the bottom, his hand brushed against something soft. He pulled it out. It was a mint-green wool scarf, faded with time, but in one corner, the uneven stitches were still clear, forming a name. Grace. He remembered this scarf. Grace had knitted it herself, proudly showing him her work. He returned to the living room, the scarf still in his hand, his mind adrift. Lily looked up from her page, her eyes wide. She wasn't looking at his face, but at the scarf. Mama Grace's scarf, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Eli felt as if someone had just thrown a bucket of ice water over him. He went completely still. What? What did you say? Lily pointed at the scarf, her eyes now welling with tears. That's Mama Grace's. She always put it on me when it got cold. Mama Grace, Eli repeated, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knelt in front of her, his voice raw. Your mother, her name was Grace. Lily nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. The storm hadn't just brought him a lost child. It had brought his past right to his doorstep. Eli was speechless, just staring at the girl, trying to reconcile the image of his lost sister with the small, living soul in front of him. Lily, after her brief show of emotion, retreated into herself, the shyness returning to her eyes. Max, as if sensing something, slowly padded over and gently nudged his head into Lily's lap. Her small hand instinctively stroked his thick fur, and the action seemed to give her a sliver of courage. Mama Grace always said I was her littlest star, she whispered, her voice clear but sad. She said no matter how dark it got, the littlest star always tried its hardest to shine. Another fragment of memory hit Eli. Summer nights he and Grace spent lying on the grass behind their house, counting the stars. Grace had always been fascinated by them. He looked at Lily, his heart aching. A loud crackle from a log in the fireplace made Lily flinch, her small shoulders tensing. She unconsciously tightened her grip on Max's fur. "It's okay," Eli soothed. "Mama Grace always held me tight when I cried." She continued, as if reassuring herself. "She'd hug me and say her arms were the safest place in the world." "What happened then, Lily?" Eli asked gently. "After Mama Grace was gone, where did you live?" "With Tracy and Martin," she said. And at those names, Max's ears perked up, and a low growl rumbled deep in his chest. Eli didn't miss it. "Tracy," he repeated, struggling to keep his voice calm. "Your stepmother?" Lily nodded. "She didn't like me. Said I was the mess Mama Grace left behind." Her voice trembled, and Eli noticed her hand tightening around her pencil. "She said I was too quiet, too weird, that I ruined everything." She didn't cry, not once, but Max was on his feet now, circling the table, and pressing himself against her leg. She leaned into him as if trying not to fall apart. "She told everyone I stole Sophie's new game," Lily continued, "on her birthday. She made me clean everything while they ate cake. Then she said I couldn't sleep in the house anymore." A silence fell over the room, heavier and colder than the blizzard had ever been. Those words, combined with the uncanny resemblance, erased any last shred of doubt in Eli's mind. The belief that Lily was his niece drove Eli to seek answers to the most agonizing question: what had happened to Grace? And who were these people, Tracy and Martin? The investigation began with a name typed into a search bar late at night. Among a sea of results, one hidden obituary from a local paper made his heart skip a beat. It was short and cold, but one detail at the very end changed everything. Grace Turner was a devoted employee at Sparrow's Nest Children's Home. A children's home? Eli frowned. That didn't sound like the Grace he knew. He looked up the number. The next morning, with a deep breath, he made the call. A warm, elderly woman's voice answered. It was Mrs. Gable, the director. When Eli identified himself as Grace's brother, her tone softened with sorrow. "Oh, Grace. A wonderful soul. We were all devastated when she passed." "Ma'am," Eli said, his voice trembling slightly. I'm trying to find out about her daughter, Lily." There was a long, unsettling pause on the other end of the line. "Her daughter?" Mrs. Gable repeated, the surprise in her voice genuine. "Eli, Grace never had a child of her own." The words hit Eli like a physical blow. The room began to swim. "Number that can't be right," he stammered. "Lily. She calls her Mama Grace. She has her scarf." "Yes," Mrs. Gable said softly, her voice now full of sympathy. "Lily was one of our most special children. Her birth mother was a young girl who passed away shortly after giving birth. Grace was with her in her final days, and after, Grace loved Lily as if she were her own. She was Lily's sun and moon, but they didn't share blood, Eli." "Then, who were Tracy and Martin?" "Mrs. Gable," he asked, his voice hoarse, "do you know a Tracy and Martin Miller?" This time, the warmth in Mrs. Gable's voice vanished, replaced by a cautious chill. "I do. They're distant relatives of Grace's who showed up right after she died. Said they would take responsibility for Lily." "Why?" Eli pressed, a cold dread snaking down his spine. "Why would they take her in?" Mrs. Gable sighed, a sound heavy and weary over the phone, as if she were about to speak a dirty truth. "For the money," she said, her voice now like a verdict. "Grace left a small life insurance policy, and the sole beneficiary was Lily. It wasn't much, but it was enough for the Millers to live comfortably for a few years. They took Lily in just to get that money. When it ran out, so did their patients. The second shock was more devastating than the first. It wasn't just deceit. It was calculated cruelty." Eli hung up, but kept the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the dead silence. He looked across the living room, where Lily sat on the rug, Max standing guard beside her. She wasn't his blood. The only connection he thought he had to her had just shattered like broken glass. Eli's fingers twitched. He slowly stood and walked to the old writing desk near the bookshelf. It hadn't been touched in years. Grace used to sit there, writing letters she rarely sent. He opened the top drawer and began to rifle through envelopes, bills, scribbled poems, and sketches, until his fingers found a yellowed envelope with his name on the front in faded black ink. Eli. He sat back down at the desk and opened it carefully. The paper inside was soft with age. Grace's handwriting looped in long, uncertain strokes. Eli, if you're reading this, I probably wasn't able to tell you myself. I never wanted it to end like this between us. You were my rock. I know I let you down. But Lily, she isn't a mistake. She's the one good thing I did right. If something happens to me, and if by some grace of God this letter finds you, please don't let her get lost. She deserves more than I ever gave her. Love, Grace. Eli read the letter twice, then laid it flat on the desk. Lily watched him, silent. That's her handwriting, he said. Lily nodded. I used to trace the letters with my finger, she said. She'd say, words have weight. Eli looked at Max, who now sat straight beside Lily, body rigid, ears aimed at the door. You knew, didn't you, boy? He murmured. That night, after Lily was asleep and Max had taken up his post outside her door, Eli looked toward the hallway where Max stood sentinel and spoke softly to himself. We're not losing her again. The next morning, a harsh, pounding knock on the door tore through the quiet. Before him stood a woman with bleached blonde hair and a fake worried expression, and a heavy-set man standing back a pace. Tracy and Martin Miller. Thank God. We've been worried sick, Tracy said, her voice honey-sweet. Our little Lily ran off. We followed the tracks and they led here. Have you seen her? Eli didn't move, blocking the doorway like a solid wall. His eyes were ice. She's here, he said, his voice flat. And she's staying. The feigned concern on Tracy's face vanished, replaced by annoyance. Who are you to keep her? We're her legal guardians. Give her back to us, now. No, Eli answered, a single word that landed with the weight of lead. Seeing Eli's resolve, Tracy launched into her performance, her voice shrill and pleading. Oh my God, what has she told you? Don't believe a word. That girl is a pathological liar. She's defiant. She steals from us. A real handful. We've put up with so much. The more Tracy talked, the louder Max's growl became. The dog was no longer behind Eli. He stepped forward, planting himself between his master and the strangers. The fur on his neck bristled, his upper lip curling back to reveal a flash of white teeth. His growl was no longer low. It was a deadly warning. Tracy flinched back, her bravado melting into undisguised fear. Your dog. Get him. Eli placed a hand on Max's head, not to restrain him, but as a gesture of solidarity. He looked Tracy dead in the eye. He doesn't like liars, Eli said, his voice glacial. Now, get off my property. His words were a wall of steel. Martin Miller, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward, his bulky frame eclipsing Tracy. Who the hell do you think you are? He snarled. You think you can just take her from us? I'm not taking, Eli replied, unfazed by the threat. I'm protecting, something you two were supposed to do. We'll call the cops, Tracy shrieked, her fear now replaced by a shameless rage. We'll have you arrested for kidnapping. A faint, barely perceptible smile touched Eli's lips. Be my guest. I'm sure the sheriff would be very interested to hear about Grace Turner's life insurance policy, and about why a little girl was found dying in the snow while her guardians were warm in their beds. That was the killing blow. Tracy and Martin's confidence crumbled. They looked at each other, panic naked in their eyes. They were exposed. Just then, a small figure appeared in the doorway to the living room. Lily. She stood there, trembling, her eyes fixed on the people she once had to call family. Lily. Sweetheart. Tracy's demeanor shifted instantly, her voice sickeningly sweet. Come to mommy. Let's go home. Lily shrank back a step, her whole body flinching as if she'd been struck. She didn't run to Tracy. Instead, she darted forward, hiding behind Eli, her small hands clutching the fabric of his pants. Number, she whispered, her voice nearly lost to the wind. Then, gathering all her courage, she spoke louder, her voice still trembling but full of resolve. I want to stay here, with Eli and Max. Lily's declaration was the final straw. Tracy's face twisted in fury. You ungrateful little brat. Martin took a step forward, his fists clenched, but before he could do anything, another sound cut through the tension, the approaching rumble of an engine. An old SUV pulled up just behind the Miller's car. A woman stepped out, her demeanor professional and calm. Looks like I got here just in time, she said, her sharp eyes taking in the scene: the furious Millers, the protective stance of Eli, and the little girl hiding behind him. Who are you? Tracy snapped. I'm Danielle Ramos, with Social Services, the woman answered, her voice void of emotion. I received a call from Mr. Turner a few days ago, providing some disturbing information. Danielle walked forward, looking directly at the Millers. I've reviewed the files. I've also spoken with the director at Sparrow's Nest Children's Home. She paused, then turned her gaze to Lily, who was still clinging to Eli. She knelt to meet the girl's eyes, her voice softening. Hi, Lily, are you safe? Lily said nothing, just nodded desperately, tears finally starting to fall. Daniela stood, her expression hardening. Based on the preliminary evidence, testimony from involved parties, and especially what I'm witnessing right here, she said, her voice now steel, Lily will be placed in the temporary care and protection of Mr. Eli Turner, pending a formal hearing. What? You have no right, Martin roared. I have every right, Danielle countered, not flinching. And if you don't leave this property immediately, I will have the sheriff escort you. I'm sure he'll have plenty of questions for you as well. Defeated and exposed, Tracy and Martin muttered curses and stormed back to their car, speeding away and leaving a trail of dark exhaust in the cold air. When the car was gone, silence returned. Eli let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He could feel Lily's small, trembling hand still clutching his leg. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder. The war was just beginning, but the most important battle, the one for Lily's safety, had just been won. The courtroom was cold and formal. Eli presented Grace's letter, his voice cracking as he read his sister's final plea. He didn't make accusations. He simply spoke of a home, a safe place that Lily deserved. When Judge Hart, an older woman with discerning eyes, asked for Lily's wishes, the entire courtroom held its breath. What do you want most, Lily? She asked gently. Lily looked up, her eyes clear, her voice a whisper but firm. I just want to live with my Uncle Eli and Max. Judge Hart's gavel fell, her voice decisive. The court recognizes the evidence of neglect and emotional abuse. Based on this unique emotional bond and the child's own wishes, custody of Lily is hereby granted to Mr. Eli Turner. Spring came to Fairbend, bringing with it warmth and the green of new life. The blizzard was now a distant memory, and with it, the chaos in Eli's cabin had melted away. Their lives settled into a new rhythm, one of quiet peace. Mornings no longer began with heavy silence, but with the sound of Lily chattering to Max about her dreams, or the smell of toast Eli was making. The change in Lily was the greatest miracle. She was no longer timid, no longer curled in a corner with a notebook of dark images. Now, her sketchbook burst with color, a drawing of Max basking in a sunbeam, one of Eli stoking the fire, and countless wildflowers she'd picked in the woods. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch, Eli asked, "Are you happy here, Lily?" She nodded without hesitation. "I am," she said, "because Max is here. He always stays." For Lily, Home wasn't a place. It was the presence of unwavering loyalty and unconditional love. For Eli, Lily's presence had healed wounds he thought would follow him to the grave. He was no longer the solitary soldier haunted by his past. Lily's laughter filled the silent voids in his heart, and the responsibility of protecting her gave him a new purpose, clearer and stronger than any mission he'd ever undertaken. The soldier had found his final duty: to be a father. The story ends on a summer evening at dusk. The three of them, Eli, Lily, and Max, sat together on the porch steps, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. Lily sat in the middle, leaning against Eli on one side, her other hand resting on Max's warm fur. She was telling them about a cloud shaped like a rabbit. Eli looked at the two souls beside him. The blizzard hadn't just been a rescue, it had been a homecoming. It had brought Lily to him, and in doing so, it had brought him back to life. In the quiet of the sunset, he understood something profound. Love isn't bound by blood, and the truest families have the power to heal the deepest of wounds.